Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Sup/X/ have any of you guys from Central America have any paranormal experiences? My dad has one story he tells me, and I always get chills every time he tells it. Be dad, around 16, be in Guatemalan city of Quetzaltenango. Mountain and fields were barely populated at the time, so it is completely dark, like pitch black. Back when the only thing you had to fear were ghosts instead of bandits and gang members. Dad goes to the mountain to go get Grandpa after a long day of tending the fields, walking on a dirt road in the dark with nothing but the moon shining. Get to a part where vegetation is heavy. Suddenly hears rustling in the nearby bushes as he walks by them. By then my dad is on the verge of emptying his lunch into his pants. Suddenly a black mass, as he recalls it, comes out of the bushes and walks probably around 5 feet besides him. The thing is basically mumbling gibberish and keeps walking beside him. My dad at this point is terrified as shit and dares not to look at his side where the thing is following. The entity soon goes back to the direction it came from and goes back into the bushes. My dad just started to book it in hopes to find my grandpa. What he worried about the most was that another person might have given my grandpa a ride back to his house and he had to go back to the same route he took where the entity came out of. Luckily, he heard the radio in the distance. A feeling of relief finally came to him when he realized that he was walking down the way home. He tells him about it, and Grandpa says he's lucky the spirit didn't win him. When a spirit wins someone, it just means that it kills them. A couple of days pass by, and he then sees a local newspaper article that says that one of their friends that he knew was killed in the area where my dad was walking by. My dad was spooked out of his mind when he came to learn that the thing was his friend trying to talk to him via mumbles. I'll tell of another happening, but it's from my sister's experience over there. Be sister around 15 years old. Be staying at my cousin's house while visiting Guatemala. Cousin's house at the time was a 2-story building that was notorious for being haunted. That is, weird shadows, disembodied voices, footsteps walking around late at night. Point is, my sister and my mom were at cousin's house and started to hear weird shit during the night. My sister hears that there's a crowd talking outside the window in her room, down on the 2nd floor near the street. Starts to think nothing of it, but soon realizes, who the hell would meet at 2 a.m. and talk as a crowd, let alone on the street? Notices that all stray dogs around the area are barking at a specific location near cousin's house. The window looks out to the street, but she doesn't dare look outside. Come morning, sister tells cousin's mother-in-law what happened. Replies, "Luckily you didn't look, or else whatever it was would have taken your soul." Shitbrick.jpg. Another thing that both my sisters witnessed was a shadow figure that darted across the room and into a wall. Been to his house, and only thing I felt was someone watching me everywhere. But that's about all the spooky stuff I've encountered.
I'll contribute, not the best story, but I haven't thought about it in a while, and for whatever reason this thread reminded me of it. Be me, young, maybe 7 or 9 years old. My memory is a bit hazy. Was leaving my sister's room on the 2nd floor. I was bugging her about something random/hanging out. Begin walking down the stairs. Hear a scream from her room. Loud. Like bloody murder. This was before phones were big and she had no such thing or computer in the room. Plus I could hear it vibrate through the walls like an actual scream. Kinda scared, but like that's my sister. So I sprint back up and slam through the door like a tight end through a punter. Ask her WTF was that. Like what the hell, dude? I should reiterate, this wasn't like a spurg excited scream or a high-pitched whoop. It was a genuine scream of terror. She said she didn't make any such noise. Denies hearing it. No one else in the house really heard it either. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just nuts.
This one comes from a counselor named Harry I used to go to as a kid, actually. Although officially I no longer have appointments with him, we hang out from time to time since he lives near me and we talk about life and shoot shit. He's not from Central America, and I'm not either, but in the 70s or 60s he was a part of the Peace Corps and went down to Nicaragua. He spent most of his time there chilling with the locals, drinking, smoking weed, and partaking in general hippie shenanigans. but he also said his scariest life experience came from his time down there, and even says this story is the reason he now believes in the paranormal. It was getting late one night, and he, a buddy from the Peace Corps named Roger, and a local Nicaraguan by the name of Luis had been chilling by a campfire drinking a few beers. Harry brings up something about Vietnam, and Luis shoots to his feet, saying he has something to show the two. He hobbles back into his little shack and comes out with something wrapped up in a bundle of cloth. He tosses it to Harry, who quickly unbundled it. Harry doesn't know what he's looking at first, and asks Luis what it is. "Night eyes," he says. Luis guides him to put it on and flicks it on for him. Harry described it as the entire jungle around him was lit up in fluorescent red. It made his head spin and his eyes sting, but he could see perfectly in the darkness, even being able to make out small details like the pores on his hands. Harry and Roger both ask where Luis got it, and he quickly explains he found it down by the coast in a box of military supplies that had washed up. He knew he shouldn't have poked through it reasonably, but couldn't help himself, and the only undamaged thing in the box was a pair of these night vision goggles. This is the part where Harry always would get chills when he kept describing it. He said he was looking over at Luis as he was talking about all this, and he turned back to Roger and went pale as he saw some shadowy figure slowly striding up behind Roger. I asked what he meant by shadowy the first time he told this story to me, and he said it was this just pitch-black spot in the vision of the goggles. Everything else he could see clearly through a strong red tint, but whatever this was, it simply was not being illuminated. Harry quickly ripped the goggles. Roger and Luis both were standing over him now because he was sweating and snow-pale. Roger asked him what was going on, if he needed to go to the hospital, and Harry took a second to compose himself and said it was nothing. He was just seeing shit from the alcohol. He handed the goggles over to Roger to try them out, and after he got the bulky straps around his head, he turned around to look through the jungle and immediately locked up, breathing just as heavy as Harry did. Except he couldn't get the goggles off. He was well and truly frozen. Harry and Luis both asked him if something was wrong, and he just couldn't respond. All he could do was mumble and whimper before Luis ripped the goggles off his head, and Roger fell over limp into the mud. They rushed him to a local clinic and got him checked over. He was fine aside from some minor bruising from the fall and an abnormally high heart rate and blood pressure. Harry stayed with him in the clinic until he woke up in the morning. On their drive back to a meeting with the other Peace Corps members, Harry asked him what he saw that night. Roger clammed up again. "I saw the devil," is all he would ever say. Harry swears up and down Roger was never a religious man either. Not then, not since, not before.
Not Central America, but a similar story. Work night shifts. One day I get off work early. It's like 5 in the morning. Wintertime around 2014-ish. It's very cold, snowing, and there's not one person outside yet. As I walk home from work, I have to pass an empty area where there are no houses, no buildings, and only a few bushes and trees. It snowed all night, and there's a thin layer of fresh snow everywhere. It's easy to see even in the darkness of the night. As I walk home, I need to take a piss, so I walk off-road into a small bush. As I lean behind the bush to piss, I distinctly hear 2 female voices talking gibberish. Not any language I can recognize. Sounds like blah 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 blah, utter gibberish. They'll see me piss. I better hurry. I quickly finish and get back on the road, only to see nobody. Nobody at all, not one person. Also because it snowed. I can see my own footsteps, but I can't see any other footsteps. The gibberish also suddenly stopped. Suddenly I feel invaded by this dread, this sudden feeling of utter fear, and I freak out. I shit bricks, get paranoid as hell, and run all the way home. Take several buses and change several transportations to lose my tracks in case I'm being followed. I told this story many times on /x/. It's the only one concrete case of a spooky paranormal phenomenon that happened to me, that I can't explain to this day.
Be me. After school. Foggy but dry. Waiting for the bus at the train station, Horsens, to get home. It's winter, so it's dark at like 16 or 17. Here's someone telling me to be careful in the future. Older man. Never saw him approach. Had a cane with him and was wearing a tan jacket. His left eye was weird. The man walks off towards the train station's 7-Eleven. I look away for a split second. The man has now disappeared. Another story. I was in Italy on vacation. Piemonte, Cuneo area, Alba Asti Dogliani. One of those been to Italy several times, can't remember which town it was, large estate, old furniture and a tower. Pig farm nearby, noise at all hours, lots of crickets. See widowers on the road on the way there, fields of wine up and downhill as far as the eye can see. Mountains in the distance. Saw a small red van, thingy, 3-wheel drive, into the driveway of a castle. Anyways, my brother and I are staying in the tower. Wake up in the living room in the middle of the night. This is on the second story. I had been watching Nosferatu while staying there because I like old movies. Look outside the impenetrable darkness. Go outside, the door to the tower is locked. Wake up! Parents have the tower door unlocked. I'm in the bedroom at the top of the tower.
I got one from my mom that she told me about her relative, be mom's cousin, eating late at night because coming home from work late, starts hearing mumbling outside the house. Looks at the door window, sees slow movement and dim lights. Opens a window to see what's going on. Sees a large funeral procession happening. Looks at the procession and it hits her. Why would there be a procession at night? Keeps looking on, and soon, a lady goes to her door and hands her a candle through her window. She takes it, put it in her drawer. Eventually, she goes to bed. The next morning, she checks her drawer and it turns out the candle was a femur. She immediately tells her mother, tells her to throw it away. Soon after her health starts to decline, she withers away in bed, she dies. Mom was severely spooked enough to not go to the windows at night and fear the procession coming out again.
Hello. 3 years ago, I had an encounter I cannot explain during a family trip to Central America, Guatemala to be more specific. Anyway, it started as any other normal day there, some exploring here and there, and then we arrived at my uncle's house where we were staying at the time. After talking with my family for a little, I decided I was going to bed. My uncle has a pretty big house, so I had a room to myself. It was cold that night, so I made sure the windows were closed before closing my door. Everything was fine until the next morning. I woke up and I felt as though I was being watched. I felt a deep fear I've never felt before in my life. So I moved my legs to a position where I could just hop out and run out of there. But I didn't feel safe doing that, so I decided I was going to look around only using my eyes to make sure the coast was clear. I looked at the window, and I noticed that it was around 9 or 10 a.m. because of how bright the sun's light was. But I sensed something was close, so I looked to the left top corner of the room, and I see a pale white girl with the longest face I've never seen staring at me. Her eyes were pure black, and her mouth was black as well in a perfect circle shape. She was in a white gown and appeared to be just hanging there with her hands and feet. Her knees were bent, and the only body parts that were touching the wall were her hands and feet. I was frozen in fear and started hyperventilating. I was afraid to even blink, but eventually I gave up. In that split second, she was gone. Needless to say, I got the hell out of there. Outside the room, I saw my family calmly eating breakfast. I didn't want to seem crazy, so I found my composure and sat at the table, reflecting on what had just happened. I remembered thinking it was just sleep paralysis, although I've never experienced that before. I thought there was a first time for everything. But then I also remembered the window. I asked everyone in the house if they'd gone into my room and opened the window. Everyone said that they haven't been in my room or have touched anything inside it. Then I also remembered how I was able to move while this was taking place, which would be inconsistent with sleep paralysis. I kept quiet about it because Central America is a pretty superstitious place and didn't want to alarm anyone. This isn't some creepypasta or anything. This actually happened to me. That was 3 years ago, but I can still clearly remember her face, and every time I do the hairs all over my body stand. But I am still curious about it. Pick is my terrible sketch of what I saw. Doesn't do what I saw justice, but it's what I got. What do you guys think?
An old friend of a friend spent some time in Central America with the Peace Corps, if I remember correctly. This was a while back, and I'm green texting from memory, so there are probably errors, but basically, in Mexico, staying with a local family temporarily. One of his first nights there, he's out working late. Returns home after dark. There's an old woman waiting for him out in front of the house. She tells him, "Hey, the whole family is asleep inside, so try to be quiet when you go in." He hasn't been introduced to this woman and is wondering who she is. She calls herself Lola and says she's so-and-so's grandmother. Guy can't ask any questions because Lola ushers him inside quickly, almost impatiently, and reminds him to be quiet on the way in. Guy goes in, been working hard all day, finds his pallet on the ground and instantly falls asleep. Wakes up the next morning, tells the family about Lola and asks where she lives. Woman he's staying with looks shocked, shows him a pic of her mother, Lola. She passed away years ago. Turns out she died in the front room where the guy was sleeping.
Hey/X/ going to share some horrifying shit right now on this Sunday morning. Perhaps the hangover has me in the mood. Pick related, it's San Juancito in the 19th century. Relevant later. I hail from Honduras, Central America, the most violent country in the hemisphere and all-round shithole. We've always had stories about the chupacabras or the Llorona, the weeping lady. But I'd always considered them bullshit. I'm a city boy, you see, and in Honduras a city is basically a really big town, very big and boring town. It happened when I was 16, a junior, didn't have much friends really. My schoolmates were fine dudes, but they were all mostly rich, so they used to hang out after class in hotel bars and stuff. My mom was an old friend of the school owner, both went to law school, so she got a discount plus the benefit of paying until she had the money. To make friends, I guess, my mom enrolled me in Taekwondo classes at my city's public gymnasium. I hated it. Passionately hated it, having to do warm-ups, running laps, constantly practicing the same kick over and over. The pain in my thighs, hated it. The only thing that got me going was the archery guys who practiced behind the gym. I used to sit with them after workout, while they were downing Gatorades and telling stories about banging girls and how the volleyball team was filled with whores. Among them, I admired Jimmy, not his real name. He was 4 years my senior and down to earth. He was cool, had a hot girlfriend, basketball player, and used to talk in a way you could never say no. So Jimmy was a cool dude surrounded by cool dudes and a hot lady, and I was a 16-year-old junior without friends, and one day after running all those hateful laps at 5 p.m., I was walking back home at sunset with the sky bleeding red, and from behind me a voice called, "Why are you moving so fast?" I turned. It was Jimmy. Doubted he could be calling me. Looked around to see if it was a mistake until he caught up with me and said, "Wow, stop, man, you really are an impatient boy." I laughed, nervous. The dudes and I like to go camping on weekends to relieve ourselves of stress. You know, this city can get really heavy on one's nerves. I'd heard them talk about those camping trips before and even was present when they planned one, but never had the balls to invite myself, perhaps because I was afraid to make a fool out of myself between all the alcohol and women and older, wiser guys. Perhaps you could come to the next one this weekend. We'll be shooting some arrows and booze. With you and the archery guys? No, not them, only you and me. I glanced at him with the eyes one man gives another when his offer is just too stupid. Wow, no man, you got me wrong. See, all right, the thing is, I want to take my girlfriend, all right? And you know, she is a little rich girl and her dad is one of those fat assholes that appear in Congress sessions on TV. And he won't allow her if she doesn't take her cousin with her. So, I thought that since we are like cousins, you and me, Perhaps you can come and keep company with the girl. Have you seen my girlfriend? Pretty hot, huh? Her cousin is better. I said yes and asked my mom, who I knew would say yes because I needed friends, and effectively she did. We were going to the forest behind San Juancito, a 1-hour drive outside of Tegucigalpa, capital of Honduras, my city, a hole surrounded by mountains, speculated to be a lake in prehistoric times.
Mas rapido, dude. By the way, how's Honduras after the coup?
The economy is shit, no jobs. I have 2 licenciaturas, one in history and one in psychology, and the best I can get is a stupid call center job. The narcos are pretty much everywhere now, and the revolutionaries' forces have died down. The story, then. Jimmy picked me up in front of the gymnasium. My mom had packed a gigantic mountaineer bag equipped with everything, from ropes to multiple flashlights, a stupid-looking helmet, and some construction boots. I was a caricature of a camper. The cousin will arrive at the camping site. Jimmy told me while driving, and his girlfriend laughed. I was naive enough to believe him. San Juancito is, for all intents, a dead town. It is so close to the city that most but all of its poorer residents migrate to Tegucigalpa to live and study. The old folk that remain are illiterate and superstitious, the good old folk at least, those that haven't succumbed yet to the screeches and money-making of evangelical Christians. As we arrived, Mass was ending at the cathedral. It was pretty early in the morning, and pigs could be heard squealing and church bells tolling, and old ladies reciting the Hail, Virgin Mary, or the Angelus. I felt uncomfortable. I didn't belong. Some middle-aged amputees could be seen here and there. San Juancito was famous for its mine, a gold mine that belonged to a U.S. company masquerading as a national one. It was abandoned in the 1920s, and the villagers, some courageous ones, ventured deep into it to salvage some ore with sticks and metal pikes. It was not uncommon to hear on the news about it collapsing on top of some father and son combo. The amputees were the lucky ones who hadn't been poisoned by natural gases. I remember reading some years ago about how the San Juancito mines were a nest for chupacabras. I shrugged it off because I thought the guy was a Jaime Maussan ripoff. Before noon, we had traversed town, entered the quiet forest, saw the mines, and arrived at camping site.
No. Companies have just realized a slip of paper does not automatically qualify you for a job over someone without the slip of paper, if they have more experience or something. I got a job programming with only a GED because I built shit before, and meanwhile my friend with a computer science degree can't find shit and can barely program. Not only that, but before this I worked at ATT and aced their test and got $20 an hour while everyone else failed theirs. Half the people looked high or dumb. Hell, you can get a good job in security and work up to being armed or be a night shift guard even to make decent money. It's not hard. I'm so sick of people crying about how MUD diploma isn't a magic ticket. Well then you should have made connections in college, or got a good word in from the professor.
Dude, nepotism has me pissed, I guess, but don't want to mention that since here, nepotism is a group thing. I got my networking right, I got my own startup and editorial printing stuff. I print and edit my own magazine, which is sorta successful. I sell to recoup everything with 1/4 of production. So guess I should have worded that other ways.
You see, I was an excuse. I was from that moment on at the toll at the inspection pass, where they search for booze and pot that the campers may take. For the transitos, that's how we call the police in charge of asking for your driving license and vehicle plate. Not more than an excuse. I, a shy, thin, and naive boy, repeatedly hearing from Jimmy, "I'm taking my little brother camping. Let us pass. He doesn't get to go out so often." I also bought the tickets at the toll since I got student discount, and the adults accompanying me got a discount from bringing a minor, and we got to camp at the best clearing in the forest because I was a minor, and Jimmy, my old bro, needed to take care of me. At campsite, Jimmy prepared the tents, unloaded the booze from his truck, hidden beneath some equipment, and took out his bow and quiver. We went strolling to a nearby pond. They lit a joint, offered me, I refused, pushed it, refused again. As she was swimming, Jimmy started playing around with his bow, shooting trees, hearing birds I couldn't hear. His girlfriend, bored, pulled him in the water, ruined his precious bow. They started kissing, while I was sitting on a rock overlooking the pond with my big boots and stupid helmet. The sun was still up and they were getting a little touchy, so I got up and said, "I'm going back to the tent." They paid me no attention. In the tent, I drank a couple of booze and fell asleep as the grasshoppers and nightbirds started making noises. When I woke up, it was still night. I could feel Jimmy and his girlfriend sleeping next to me. Don't know how much time passed, but I started hearing breathing, slowly at first. It was noisier than the birds, so I guessed it was closer. The breathing overtook all sounds, even my heartbeat and my own breathing, and it was putrid as the water from the pond in which they bathed. The tent started moving and rustling as if something was pulling it. Oh great, they are in the mood, I thought. The breathing was so heavy and the smell so foul. Jimmy, the tent is gonna fall. He didn't answer. Jimmy, seriously, man, the tent is gonna fall. He mumbled. He was still asleep. Whatever was breathing was outside, so close it could overtake all sounds. Jimmy wakes up. I rustled him, screamed. There was something pulling, breathing, pulling, breathing. Who is it? He said. The pulling continued. We paid to be here. Stop bothering, he said stronger. His girlfriend woke up. He, as the man he was, decided to show his bravado, unzipped the tent and went out and immediately went back in and pulled his girlfriend from the ankle. I followed, scared, and grabbed my gigantic bag. He was breathing heavily, holding her, scared. They were looking at something. Behind the tent, I turned. All I could see was the reflection of the moon in two small dots, eyes, two very small and dark eyes. As the pulling, slight pulling, as a kid pulling a blanket continued, and the breathing, that horrible and putrid breathing, and the saliva, Jimmy started backing up. Slowly I followed, as I unzipped my bag and took out a lantern. When we are close to the car, I'll light it, I said. We were fixed on those two dots as we backed up, two small and shining dots just looking to God knows where, pulling and pulling until they disappeared. It's okay, I kept thinking, and I turned the flashlight on and I could hear Jimmy running and his feet blistering as the rocks and sticks wounded his feet. And I pointed to where the tent was, and there for a few seconds, as it ran away, was a thing, pale thing, almost serpent skin, humanoid but with a small torso, his mouth drooping saliva and a semblance of black lips, long arms with long fingers, no claws or nails, just long, pointed fingers, very short legs and big feet. It stood there as for mere a couple of seconds, as if disoriented, as if the light wasn't reaching it, and then ran to the forest, and I ran also, thinking it could get me. And Jimmy had started his car and we drove to the city with no sleep. Jimmy insisted it was a sick dog or a sick jaguar. There are no bears in Honduras, and I doubt it.
Be me, 13, visiting Costa Rica. Love the Jurassic Park books, so we visit the coast. Walking along the beach at night, rents were asleep back at the hotel. See this girl with a flower tucked on her ear, trying to get plastic bags out of a seagull's throat. I walk over and get it out. She turns and smiles at me. We walked around on the beach for a bit, but she was always walking where the dirt met the sand. I start talking about how I love nature and other bullshit that I was just saying at the time to sound deep. We keep talking until the sun comes up. Before I go back to the room, she tells me her name is Maria. Sleep until the afternoon. I woke up and the flower that she had on her ear was on the windowsill. Years later, I go on /x/ and develop an interest in the supernatural. Find out about Maria Leonza, apparently a nature spirit in South and Central America.
My family is from Guatemala. My parents grew up in a town close to the pyramids of Tikal, in a very mountainous area. In 1976, when my parents were around 10 to 12 years old, there was a horrible earthquake that killed and injured hundreds of thousands of people. My dad was even trapped for days under the rubble of his home before being rescued. It's a horrible memory for them. I have many family members with similar stories. That isn't the paranormal tale though, but events leading to it were. This is the story as told to me by my parents. About a year, maybe a little more, strange things started to happen in the forested mountains near their town. It started with the cries. Every night something would continuously cry in the mountains. At first they thought it was possibly a wild cat in heat. However, they started to realize that this sound could be heard from everywhere in the town. My mom said it sounded like a man wailing in pain or anguish. It happened every night around the same time and lasted sometimes for hours. A few months later, the sightings started. It started with a large bird flying over the town and mountains. Then a large humanoid creature was seen in the mountains. My mom described it as kind of like Bigfoot, only that it was completely white and less hairy. The people who crossed its path said its eyes were very pale, and the noise they heard at night sounded the same as the cry it would emit when spotted. An anguished, horrified sound. Almost exactly a year after the first sound started, the earthquake hit, and my parents' town, being close to the epicenter, suffered great damages. Many people died, were injured, or became homeless. The wails completely stopped after the earthquake. My mom often ponders if it was some sort of angel coming to warn of the coming disaster, and it left having been unable to be understood. My dad believes whatever it was probably died just like many others, falling victim to the earthquake.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.